Okay, as far as I know, I have never looked at this test before, so I'm doing it just like you, and we're going to see, maybe I'll get some wrong, but I'm going to use the no reading strategy to sort through these questions. I am not going to time myself. Instead, I want to take the time to explain my reasoning as clearly as possible as I go through the questions. But just to be clear, when I take actual SATs, I use the no reading strategy, I go right to the questions, and I am able to finish in time all 5 passages, no problem. So it does work. You just got to get used to it. So hopefully by seeing me do a full passage, you'll be able to see how I think. So let's get started. First things first, I would read the blurb, see if it gives me any information. This passage is adapted from Robertson Davies' What's Bred in the Bone by Robertson Davies. Frank Cornish is a young boy in Canada during World War I. So this is why you read the blurb. That seems important. Young boy in Canada, World War I. Okay, cool. So let's go right to the first question. And it looks like an evidence pair. Great, so I'm going to be able to do this. Which statement about Frank's attitude toward drawing can most reasonably be inferred from the passage? So let's go to these line references. So 1 through 4, where you care about his attitude towards drawing. So 1 through 4 is here. Frank's life was not at all dark. He was not clever at school, but he attracted Miss Glattery's attention by the seriousness with which he applied himself in the weekly half hour that was given to art. So he's serious. So cool. Let's just write that just so we have a little bit of a dumb summary. 5 to 10 is right here. That's B. Miss Glattery taught art as she taught everything, and she instructed all 3 classes at once in the mysteries of drawing a pyramid and shading one side of it so that it appeared to have a third dimension, or as she put it, in the shaded side went back and the unshaded side stuck out. Okay, so this doesn't seem to be about Frank at all, so I don't think this is right. This is about the teacher, but remember the question is about Frank's attitude toward drawing. So, okay, 12 to 14. That would be here, 12 to 14. Shading was done by scuffling down one side of the object with the flat of the pencil's point. Okay, so that's just describing what shading is. I don't think that's about his attitude, so that doesn't look good. And then 14 to 18 is right here. Yep, this. But Frank did not think that was good enough. Okay, he had learned to craft at home in which shading was done with tiny parallel lines achieved with great patience and even by cross-hatching. So all I really get from this is Frank maybe doesn't think something's good enough. He'd learned something somewhere else. Okay, so learned at home. Learned at home. So it's probably A or D, but let's see. He believes that his creativity will earn him special recognition from others. It's not about other people. It's not about what they think. Okay. He is committed to his work regardless of the diligence it requires. Well, he seems like he's devoted, but like this is getting really, really strong. He is committed to his work regardless of the diligence it requires. There's no comparison in here talking about like being really a very difficult task or a very easy task. So I don't know. That just seems wrong. It seems to be emphasizing an aspect that is not in any of these lines. He accepts the fact that while he is talented, he must still strive to improve. I don't know. It seems like if anything, choice D is the line reference D is telling us that he thinks he knows better. So I don't know about that. D, he pursues his interest in art because it gives him a rare chance to excel. Well, rare is pretty strong. I don't really like any of these choices. So let's go back. Let's see if there's something I'm missing here. Let's look at line reference A again, 1 through 4. Frank's life was not at all dark. He was not clever at school. Oh, okay. He was not clever at school, but he attracted Miss Glattery's attention by the seriousness with which he applied himself in the weekly half hour. Okay, so he's not clever. So maybe that's evidence that this is a rare chance to excel because he's good at something, then he's usually not good at things. That seems good. Let me read line reference D again. Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything. But Frank did not think that was good enough, and that's the shading. He had learned to craft at home in which shading was done with tiny parallel lines achieved with great patience and even by cross-hatching. It's just describing the shading. So it's not really comparing tasks. So I still think B is wrong. There's no comparison between hard and easy tasks. So that's not there. C, he accepts the fact that while he is talented, he must still strive to improve. No, it's just not saying like he's not saying that like I need to work really, really hard. He is just working hard. And D, we have evidence of this. Yeah, he's not clever at school. Line reference A says this, but he's still doing this. I think that's the answer. We'll see at the end. So remember, I might be wrong. So make sure you go to the end of the video to see if I'm right. Which choice best describes the passage? Well, this is very strange. This to me would be a whole passage question. Now, normally these are the first question, so I don't know what it's doing in number 3. This is very, very unusual, and I'm still going to skip it and save it for later. But I think what they're doing is trying to tell us that numbers 1 and 2 are somehow also about the entire passage, even though there's a line reference. So I don't really know what's going on there. This is very unusual. I'm going to move on to number 4. The passage suggests which similarity between Frank's grandfather and Miss Glatterly. Is there a line reference here? No. However, I do not think that this is about the entire passage. And maybe I'm wrong about number 3. Maybe it's not about the whole passage, but it seems like it. Let's do this number 4, because instead of talking about the entire passage, this seems to be very specific. We need some sort of comparison between the grandfather and Miss Glattery. I hate that name. And it's probably somewhere before lines 48 to 49. Remember, the chronology rule lets us kind of estimate line references. We don't get one because the questions are generally in chronological order. So again, I could be wrong about number 3. Maybe that is a no line reference question, but let's do 4, the grandfather and Miss Glatterly. So what do they say about him? I'm going to skim for the grandfather. I don't see it here. Frank could draw. Nothing about that. Sorry, Saturday. Here's the tickets. Ooh, where is this? Where's the grandfather? Am I missing this? This is a very weird passage. Okay. Oh, here's the grandfather. Wow, this is very weird and out of order. I don't know what's going on with this passage. So let's take a look at this. Frank had an eye for the movies that took in more than action. He saw backgrounds, landscapes, many of them painted. If you look carefully in angles, he even saw light. It was to his grandfather, the senator, that he owed this extension of his understanding. For the senator was an amateur photographer. His techniques were not sophisticated in terms of the Great War period when Frank was so often his companion. He worked with a large box camera and a tripod. So, okay, he's taking pictures. Not sophisticated seems to be the thing that's important, but I don't know what that has to do with Miss Glattery. Showed Miss Glattery's apple at half. She mean reluctantly it was all right. She did not want to encourage the boy to be fancy, so maybe both of them are like, don't be fancy, don't be sophisticated, and try to go beyond what the class demanded. Fair-minded woman, accepted her religion, no vanity. Did not go too far. So there's something about being like reserved or subdued. This is such a weird question that it's driving me all over this passage. Let's just see if we can get an answer. This might be one I would come back to and read some more because it seems to be breaking the chronology rule. Though they attempt to instruct Frank about art, they sense that Frank is reluctant to heed their advice. It doesn't really seem about Frank, either of these things I'm reading. I don't think it's about him. Though they conduct themselves modestly, they privately take great pride in their accomplishments. Maybe modestly checks off, I don't know. Though they enjoy teaching, they ultimately prefer their own artistic pursuits to helping others. I don't really get their preferences. Though they engage in artistic activities, these activities do not define their identities as professionals. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't know. B feels right, but I think I need to understand more of this passage to get this. This is a very rare case where the chronology rule and even the no reading strategy is starting to break down. This happens, but it's okay. This is why we use the no reading strategy, is we can always read more, right? We start from this place of maybe we don't need to read a lot, but sometimes the SAT throws a curveball and it's okay. You can always read more. In this case, I want to do some more questions. Let's go to 5. I'm going to come back to 4 as well. I think something weird's going on here. 48 to 49. The author's use of the phrase riches unfolded. 48 to 49. Okay. So let's switch colors here. 48 to 49 is right here. Riches unfolded. So what's the purpose of this? Then inside and into his favorite seat, which was on the aisle at the back, he did not crowd into the front rows, as did the other children. Riches unfolded, an episode locally pronounced esipode of a serial in which every week a noble cowboy was brought to the point of a horrible death by remorseless villains. Blah, blah, blah. Of course, all came out right at the end. And then another great adventure was announced. Okay, so hilarious comedy. This just seems like it's good. The movie is good. Or whatever it is. Yeah, this just seems that they like the movie. Emphasizing the complexity of the movie's plot? No. Conveying Frank's delight in the movie shown? Yeah. Contrasting Frank's reaction to the movies with that of other children? No, it's not about the other children. Suggesting the care taken by the theater's staff? No, it's not about the staff. Yeah, definitely this, right? They're just saying it's a good movie, good experience. As used in line 54, right most nearly means, so 54, let's come back up here. Of course, it all came out right at the end of Episode 12, and then Another Great Adventure was announced. So it all came out okay, is what they're saying, right? The villains, there's a horrible death, the villains are winning, and then, of course, it all came out good, right? It's also something like good or happy, is my guess there. Happy. So, yeah, favorably, right? There's a happy ending, is what they're saying. Cool. 7, the sentence in lines 60 to 63 primarily serves to. So now we're going here. Maybe I'll read a little bit before. After the serial, a hilarious comedy, sometimes about the Keystone Cops, who were as incapable of dealing with disaster as the girl in the serial. Okay. Frank had an eye for the movies that took in more than the action. He saw backgrounds, landscapes, many of them painted if you look carefully, and angles. He saw light. It was to his grandfather, the senator, that he owed this exertion of his understanding, but the senator was an amateur photographer. His techniques were not sophisticated. Okay, so now it's saying he's noticing things, and the grandfather also did the same. So let's see. Suggest that the movies shown at the theater are not of high quality? No, it's not about the movies. Identify a way to distinguish landscapes from other movie backgrounds? No, because first of all, it's not about the landscapes. But second of all, it's not identifying a way. It's just saying that the character, Frank, can tell the difference between different things. It's not giving the method he uses to tell the difference. Convey that Frank applies his understanding of artistic elements to other activities? Maybe. Establish a contrast between Frank's perspective and the narrator's perspective? I don't think so. I don't think it's a contrast. He applies his understanding of artistic elements to other activities. So, where'd it go? Where'd the line go? He had an eye for movies that took in more than the action. He saw the backgrounds. He looked carefully. He saw light. Did we see that before? Don't be fancy. Things stuck out. There's shading. Frank could draw. Had a place. You know what? Now I don't even know. He was just good at it, I guess. So he could draw. That's what they're saying in all these other lines. It's drawing a pyramid. Shading was done by scuffling. Frank did not think that was good enough. He learned to craft, and shading was done with tiny parallel lines. Patience. Yeah. I don't know. Frank had an eye for the movies. So he has an eye for art. I don't know. That feels right. Suggest the movie shown in theater to not of high quality? No. Identify way to distinguish landscapes? No. Convey that Frank applies his understanding of artistic elements? Even that I don't love. Establish a contrast between his thing and the narrator? Could be more than the action. I don't know what the narrator would be saying. The narrator is just reporting on things. The narrator doesn't have a perspective. I don't like this question. I don't like C. I think that this is making some sort of assumption that's not there. Convey that Frank applies his understanding of artistic elements to other activities. Like, it didn't really get into his views on art earlier in any sort of deep way. They just say he's good at it. So I don't like this. So I'm a little nervous. But because of time, if this were a real test, I'd move on. This is the best of the 4 choices. It's possible I'm missing some line, but for the sake of time, I'd be like, all right, good enough. Let's move on. You got to do that. Now we look at 8 and 9. Based on the passage, a love of photography transforms Frank's grandfather's personality in which way? So Frank's grandfather is the main character here, transforming his personality. So 63 to 66, we're going to line reference A. 63 to 66, 63 to 66. 63 is here. It was to his grandfather, the senator, that he owed this extension of his understanding, for the senator was an amateur photographer. So it's not saying anything about his personality. There's no transformation. This is telling me what I know without answering why. Okay. 66 to 69. It's here to here. His techniques were not sophisticated in terms of the Great War period when Frank was so often his companion. He worked with a large box camera and a tripod. Again, it's just telling me a little bit about his methods. It doesn't say anything about what his personality is transforming in a way. Yeah. 77 to 79. That is here. He took pictures of young Blair Logie men who were going off to war with their rifles and kit and gave copies to their families. Again, this doesn't say anything about a transformation. Hopefully it's D, 84 to 86. Let's see. 84 to 86. His senatorial and grand paternal aloofness quite disappeared, that sounds like a transformation, on these expeditions in search of what he called sun pictures. So that's definitely the line reference. I don't know what it means, but let's take a closer look. His aloofness disappeared. Okay, let's just leave it at that. Aloofness disappeared, right? Let's see if the answer choices in number 8 give me any more understanding of what that could possibly mean. He became less impatient with members of his community. Maybe, they don't really talk about the community, but less impatient. If you're aloof, you are kind of, you stand aside from people. So I don't know if that has anything to do with patience, but it's a negative quality, and so a negative, less of a negative would be a positive. So maybe that's there. I'll keep it in. He became more enthusiastic about the war effort. I don't think it's not about the war. He interacts with Frank on a more personal level. Okay, so if you're aloof, you are not social. So maybe being more personal, that could work. He takes a more generous view of Miss Glattery. Well, I don't think the grandfather has anything to do with Miss Glattery, so that's just random. I would say this. I'm going to read a little bit extra just to see if I can get anything more about the kid. The senator never thought of himself as an artist, but he had an eye for a picture and was an enthusiastic pursuer of all the many sorts of light the Canadian seasons afford. He talked to Frank about it as if the boy were of his own age. His senatorial and grand paternal aloofness quite disappeared on these expeditions in search of what he called sun pictures. So he interacts on a more personal level. Yeah, he's talking with the kid. Yeah, he's talking with Frank. Yeah, that's definitely it. The last paragraph mainly serves to, well, that's, I think, close to what we were reading. So the last paragraph is here. It's all a question of the light, Frank, he said repeatedly. The light does it all. And he explained that all that painstaking shading in art was related to light, something which certainly had never occurred to Miss Glattery. So, okay, now we're bringing in Glattery again, and it's all about light. The shading is painstaking, so he's emphasizing the effort necessary. Underscore a contrast between Frank's grandfather and Miss Glattery. Yeah, that seems right, because they're saying that she doesn't care about the shading. We did read that before, that she's like, don't bother with the shading. I just need you to be finished with this project. So, okay, that seems right. Highlight the importance of art to Frank and his grandfather. No. It talks about light being important, but it's not about art as an important thing overall. Reveal Frank's grandfather's dissatisfaction with No, it's not that. This is way too strong. Convey Frank's admiration for his grandfather's expertise. No, this isn't Frank's perspective here. This is the grandfather talking. It's definitely a contrast. We can definitely see that right here. It never occurred to Miss Glattery to care about the shading and the light. So, I don't know, maybe we have more information to start answering numbers 3 and 4. Which choice best describes the passage? A lasting effect of a meaningful interaction between two characters is analyzed. Well, it seems like maybe there's 3 characters. There's Frank, the grandfather, and Miss Glattery, so that worries me a little bit off in the counting. The influence of a character's early experiences with art on his later life is examined. Okay, it doesn't really talk about his later life, so I don't know about that. A character's early experiences with art at school and outside of school are described. That seems weaker. That seems like a weaker version of choice B. The perspective of a young character's contrast with those of two. No, it's not contrasting old and new. It's always Frank is who we're caring about. So this is wrong. I'm going to go with C here. A character's early experiences with art at school and outside of school are described. Notice how that choice doesn't add any kind of like flavor. It doesn't talk about them being positive or negative experiences. It doesn't say that they're being compared or contrasted. It's not saying what they did later in his life. It's very bland. It's just saying right now what we're doing is we're describing these two situations, and then maybe the rest of the book is about how it affects his later life, but it's not in these lines. This right here, choice B, big trap, big trap. You're going to imagine things that aren't there. You're going to want to put that because it sounds like the kind of thing you talk about in English class in school. Big trap, big trap. 4, this is the one I had a lot of trouble with. The passage suggests which similarity between them. Though they attempt to instruct Frank about art, they sense that Frank is reluctant. No, it's definitely not about Frank. Though they conduct themselves modestly, they privately take great pride in their accomplishments. Maybe the grandfather does. I don't know about Glattery. Though they enjoy teaching, they ultimately prefer their own artistic pursuits to helping others. I don't think so. Though they engage in artistic activities, these activities do not define their identities as professionals. You know, maybe that's the answer, D. Because the grandfather is a senator. He was an amateur photographer, so it's not like it's his main thing. And Glattery is kind of like, she's an artist, but she's kind of like, you won't be finished by 4, right? You know, she does not want to encourage somebody fancy and try to go beyond what the class demanded. Yeah. Miss Glattery, who has a fair-minded woman except about religion, had no vanity. It was good, and she said nothing about it. See, like, no vanity. I don't know. This is pulling me towards that modesty thing again. They conduct themselves modestly. They privately take great pride. She's not taking great pride. She's saying just finish the job. I think it's D, but if I get anything wrong, I think it's going to be this one. So let's see. Let's take a look at the answers. All right, so I was surprised by my wrong answer here. It's number 1 and number 2 I got wrong, but everything else I got right. So 3, 4, the ones I was worried about, got them right. Everything on the next page, right. So I had some that I was unsure of, but they ended up being correct answers, probably because maybe I missed a line somewhere and there is some more evidence that would have nudged me to 100% confidence, but I missed it. Now let's talk about 1 and 2, the ones that I missed. I completely crossed out choice B, right? So the highlighted ones are the correct answers here. I crossed out choice B because I had thought he is committed to his work regardless of the diligence it requires. This is not comparing different types of tasks and saying some are easy, some are hard. However, I see what they're doing. They're saying line reference D says this. So that would be right here. Let me highlight this as well, line reference D. But Frank did not think that was good enough. He had learned a craft at home in which shading was done with tiny parallel lines achieved with great patience, even by cross-hatching. So I don't like this. I think the SAT wrote a bad question here, and sometimes this happens where you're like, they are just really stretching the meanings of things. And so I don't like this question, but I can see where they're going. What they're saying is Frank is required by Mrs. Glattery to do the shading a certain way. And he says, oh, no. Even though I'm just required to do this very basic shading, I really want to do this much more advanced shading because I want it to look good. So he's doing the harder shading. And so the problem here, for me at least, was that I had issue kind of with the word requires. I was very fixated on that. I know I didn't underline it, but it bothers me now. It's not required. See, this is the problem, is Mrs. Glattery is not requiring him to do it a certain way. She's just instructing it a certain way. So he's not required to do anything. He's just doing a better shading technique because he knows how. So he's committed to his work regardless of the diligence it requires. It's not required. So this word bothers me a lot. I get what the SAT is doing. They're saying that Mrs. Glattery wants them to do something. He wants the students to do a certain way, and he's doing it a different way because to do it right requires more attention. See, like, I don't know. That's the problem, is when you start doing what I'm doing here and coming up with a lot of extra stuff to tie a choice to a line reference, that's usually a very, very bad sign. It usually means that you are providing justification and the lines are not doing a good job of it. Now, I get what they're saying. Most reasonably be inferred means that we do need to do a little bit more work, but I think that this is not a reasonable inference. And so I disagree with the question, but guess what? Doesn't matter. So we do need to play the game a little bit, and I do understand why my answer choice that I picked, choice D, is actually wrong. He pursues his interest in art because it gives him a rare chance to excel. I looked at this phrase right here, that he is, where'd it go? Frank's life is on. He was not clever at school, but he attracted Miss Glattery. I went too far. Just being not clever at school doesn't mean you're bad. You don't excel at things. So I took that he's not particularly smart and went too far with it. So I kind of, did another bad thing just because I didn't like the choices that were offered to me, and so I needed something to fit. So I forced this one to fit. I did a little bit more assuming than I should have. It's not the case that he's rarely excelling, or we don't know that. He's just not good at school. Maybe he's good at sports. Maybe he's good at other drawing and artistic elements, and we just don't see that in the passage or at school. And so it's not that he excels rarely. It's just that he maybe doesn't excel at school, and this particular topic of art is something he is good at. But to say that he rarely excels, that is too big of a leap, and I shouldn't have made that. But all in all, there were plenty of questions here that I was confused about, and I got them right anyway, and I think that proves the point. I will that you are probably better than you think if you're just trying to follow the rules, but I will also say that this was a rare case where the chronology rule of the passage, the no reading strategy, kind of fell apart. This is rare. I wasn't expecting it, but I was still able to kind of deal with it and get most of the questions right.